Well, welcome to this conversation with Dr. Leia Cain. My name is Bhattacharya, and I have a mentoring program that Leia was part of, and it was the first cohort. So she is the OG of this mentoring program called S2S Mentoring. And Dr. Cain has very graciously agreed to talk to me about her experience in the program and then what she's doing now as a result of the program. So welcome, Dr. Cain.
Thank you.
So I wanted to get us started by sort of sketching like the terrain of where were you at the time when this program popped up on your radar, and then what made you want to join the program?
Sure. So I joined the program in my first year as an assistant professor, first year on the tenure track. And that was after being in a non-tenure track position for 5 years. So I was in a really big just area for change in my life. And I was still trying to figure out what it meant to no longer be non-tenure track and to be tenure track and to move into this position. So that's kind of where I was. I think the biggest thing that drew me, honestly, this is hard to describe and hard to measure, but I just had a feeling in my gut that this was something that I should pursue. I had looked into other academic coaching options at the time, even in the 6 months leading up to when I finally saw about S2S and reached out to you. And I don't know, something just held me back from committing to those other coaching options. And I don't know what it was, but something about S2S and talking to you, I don't know, something inside said this was what I should be doing.
Sure. A lot of times, usually what happens is like I try to write what is the most compelling reason why I'm offering the program. And usually that comes with a story. Like, this is the story. This is my driving force, energetic driving force of why I'm doing this. And then what I find are people who come to me for mentoring are for people who are compelled by similar stories, are compelled by similar journey that has an outcome that is a very desired outcome for them, just so that our listeners know what you do. Can you tell folks what your official position, title, job is?
Sure. I'm an assistant professor of evaluation, statistics, and methodology at the University of Tennessee.
Okay. Excellent. And you work with both qualitative research and mixed methods work, right?
Yes. And my mixed methods work is qualitatively driven mixed methods work. And I always feel like that's really important to specify.
Of course. Yeah, of course, because it's not as common as the other way mixed methods has been taken up. Okay. So you mentioned that, you were looking at other options as well. And I know that you have explored other options afterwards as well. So what sorts of concerns would you have, or did you have, about academic coaching or an academic consultant that would prevent you from working with them?
I think my biggest concern was that it would be a waste of time and money. Academic coaching is so expensive.
Yeah.
And I know now that it's worth it, but before I did it, the price sticker was very intimidating.
Yeah.
Even though your program was less than what other coaches were charging, I still just kept thinking, that's my whole startup fund, if I can even use that. And also, thank God I have a startup fund, because I don't have that much money in my bank account.
Sure.
And I had this worry that joining a coaching or mentoring program would just be a lot of the same stuff I've already heard, but couched in different language, and that would make it a waste of time.
Yeah.
I was worried it would be a lot more, you have to learn how to have discipline, instead of actually acknowledging like the pieces of ourselves that are broken, that are in need of work if we are to be a impactful scholar.
Mm.
Um, and like talking to you about S2S was the first time that I felt like I was sure I was not going to get that repackaged
Yeah. Yeah.
brainwashing that we tend to do in academia.
Yeah.
And I had read your work, so I also knew that you were just a really straightforward person. And that's what I wanted. I didn't want someone who was going to couch academia as this beautiful, wonderful thing that we just have to be enough for. Um, it really seemed like instead you were about making academia enough for us
Yeah.
instead of the other way around. And that's what set you apart. And that's what made me say, okay,
Yeah.
this one won't be a waste of money. We're going here.
I'm humbled and honored to hear that. And I also believe like pretty much all knowledge that can exist exists anyway, in the ether, in the universe, and in our collective knowledge bank. It exists anyway. And then we draw upon it based on our awareness. What do we focus on in our awareness? And I'm aware of a lot of other academic coaching programs, and I have no problem with them. They're beautiful. That's a lot more technical. That's a lot more how-to sort of thing. And that there's a need for that. Absolutely, there's a need for that. My program is a little bit more holistically oriented, because I wanted to work with folks that were wondering, what is it like to move through these spaces and these bodies in this time to do this work? That really is the drive, which means that I'm going to go deep into some difficult issues with people, so now I go into the nitty gritty of the program and want to know, like, what did you learn from the program about you, about your work, and what did you gain from that experience?
I think the biggest thing is that this program for me really was a spiritual awakening.
Mm.
And I say that as someone who is definitely, I don't think I've ever used that phrase before in my life. I did not consider myself to be a very spiritual person or even really think about stuff like that before. Um, but I was lost. I felt really lost in my field and in being a qualitative methodologist. I felt like I existed in this space outside of where I saw other qualitative methodologists. And so to me, the message that I was hearing from qual as a field was that I was not a part of it.
Mm.
I didn't see myself anywhere. And doing S2S, I feel like, let's see, sorry, I'm trying to think of the right words. I found myself because of S2S, and I found a way for me to exist as a scholar, as a qualitative methodologist that I didn't have before. I didn't feel any sort of ownership because I felt like such an outsider to qual. And honestly, I think that's what drove me to mixed methods. And even though I've continued doing some mixed methods work, I feel like I've really pulled away from it because I found myself in qual, and I didn't know that I could be in qual, but I found myself and I was already there. I just wasn't, I needed to see it from a different perspective than from what I felt like a lot of the dominant discourse is.
Mm. That's such a tall compliment for what you achieved in the program, finding yourself in the program, which also is kind of heartbreaking too, that why do we have discourses that are not inviting to people who might think or do inquiry a little differently? Like, so that's another topic, another discussion for another time. So I'm moved by this. I'm just trying to take it all in and keep it together for the interview, but I'm having all sorts of reaction inside at the moment to sit with the the profound nature of that shift, like here's a fellow human being. That's what you are. You're my fellow human being, and here's where we journey together. You and I journey together. And as a result of that journey, there was some form of illumination that happened for you, that you were able to see yourself in a light that you didn't see yourself before. And as a result of that, you now have an identity, a scholar identity in qualitative research that you didn't think that was even possible before. It was not in your realm of possibility. So your space of imagination expanded, and now it's a very tangible thing, which brings me to then my next question. So what have you been able to see or do as a result of this newfound identity?
Oh my gosh, honestly, the biggest thing, there's so much I could answer this question with. I think the biggest thing though is just I feel like I have the right to take up space in the qualitative community now, whereas before I didn't. And that hesitancy just fueled imposter syndrome and made me terrified to send manuscripts out and get to a point where I felt okay with someone else reading it, because I constantly felt like an imposter and like I didn't belong in qualitative spaces. And so what I was going to do was not going to be enough for those spaces. And now I don't worry about that at all. Like that is completely gone from my brain. It's not like imposter syndrome is totally gone. It will always be there. But I now know that I do have a space and deserve a space and have meaningful additions to the field that do matter, and that people will listen to, and that they deserve to be listened to. Like that was huge for me. There's the biggest thing. I have submitted so many more manuscripts in the past year than I have in my entire career leading up to that point. Because I now know that I have the right to be in the field, and I have the right to be there and add to those conversations. I mean, that's been huge. I feel like the program changed everything about how I approach my career and professional identity.
Oh, wow. Again, you're saying these things that are so profound. And I'm sitting here going, wow, just, it's such an honor to even hear that. And know you were bound to be on that path anyway. There were some things that were temporarily blocking your path, things that were probably not something that you felt you could remove from it on your own, and I partnered with you and helped you say, why are you on this path full of boulders and rocks and stuff? Here's all this other path. You can make it however we want it. Make that path. Don't try to go fight this path with snakes and boulders and all these things,
Right.
It might be an adventure, but you're going to be really tired walking this path. So how about you just create this other path, goes to other beautiful destinations on this path. And so that's the journey, metaphorically, I think we went together on. And to hear that this newfound scholar identity, where you understand yourself in all the complexities and you bring yourself to bear on your own work, it sounds to me like you became a confident and congruent researcher. By congruent, I mean congruent with who you are, what you value. You didn't want to contort yourself to something that was expected of you. You're becoming congruent with your own sense of being and knowing of how you are in this world and how you want to show up in this world. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? This congruent, confident researcher that you're becoming?
Oh my gosh. I think one of the easiest ways might be to share a story.
Okay.
So, okay. I have always been like on the books with every other scholar I talk to and like all of my students as someone who was anti-coding
Mm,
because it felt like quantitizing qualitative data.
mm,
And I feel like a lot of that had been me buying into this discourse that a lot of post-qual scholars are pushing these days, against that, and this idea of it is just quantitizing and it's removing the context. And I feel like I kind of drunk the Kool-Aid on that, but I always had this like voice in the back of my head saying, okay, but I actually really enjoy that process. And I feel like there is value to it. I want to do it. And then like that voice would just get shot down by the other voice of no, that's not really qual. That's just quantitizing. We're not being pure to qual. Whatever that even means. And after going through S2S and feeling a lot more confident in my identity, I felt like I could actually embrace this other part of me that is like, well, no, I do like doing this. And I feel like quantitizing qual could be a legitimate critique in some ways, but I also feel like it has a lot more to add to the conversation than just doing that, and that there are ways to use coding as a form of doing critical work and getting it out there, and still being true to the depth that qual has. And so now I'm just like, well, no, I actually enjoy coding and I like the way that I do it. And so I'm going to keep doing it instead of not doing it because some scholars are saying that it's not qual.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I hear you. I wrote a whole chapter on coding is not a dirty word.
Yeah, I now assign that chapter in my classes.
And it's not that I only subscribe to coding. I'm a methodologist. I do all sorts of qualitative work. If I were to collect data now, most likely I probably wouldn't go through a coding process, only because I am hungry to see what else can I do.
Right.
That's where I am in my journey. I'm in my journey. I'm like, can I paint a picture out of this? Can I do a collage out of this? Can I create a meditation track out of this? I am in like, how many different ways can I just break apart and break away from tradition to see what other ways of knowing and being and becoming with inquiry can I explore that reminds me to be true to my own self, congruent with myself, and if it's culturally situated, then being congruent with the culture and with which I'm working. But that's just the journey that I'm on. Earlier part of my career, I was using work that can be coded and was coded and published it as well. And I didn't see it as quantitizing, if that's even a word, data. I saw it as under putting a structure of chunking on the data. And sometimes people chunk with a few words. My chunking usually were like a whole paragraph, and I was like chunking by paragraphs. So I was very contextually driven. I always believed that if you are a researcher who is very reductive, it doesn't matter whether you're coding or doing post-qual, you're going to make reductive essentializing arguments anyway. It doesn't matter where you fall. So I also sort of don't really have a very strong position on like, you must do this or you must not do this. I have a position on being congruent with yourself and with your work, to do whatever is calling to you. And if that's coding, like, then just go do a really good job of it. Don't be contextualized from the work. Don't be theoretically void. Don't, forget the culture of the work of the people that you're working with, if that's the case. But you could still do good work from different worldviews and viewpoints using different approaches. So that was not an issue. I think, like, for me, I've seen that when folks put all these limitations and boundaries, you must do this, don't do this, this is what the cool kids are doing, and this is what the kids don't get to understand something they're doing. That's where we have so much division and separation, and that creates a lot of anxiety for scholars, especially new scholars, because then they don't know Like, is it okay? Am I going to be seen as a bad scholar if I do this? Am I going to be seen as like too pedestrian if I do this? You know, and you are whatever you are at that time in your learning, in your growth, in your development, you know. And if somebody told me to say meditation as a form of inquiry, like early on in my doctoral career, I would not even be able to comprehend that. Now I think it's like as easy as breathing to become, you know, that aware, you know. But I think we all have our developmental arc and journeys, and in that journeys, people are in different places, and you can have very sophisticated coding if you really want to. You know, it doesn't have to be reductive. Yeah, if you
Right. Yeah, and I've discovered that I really like starting with coding, but then like the coding itself helps me understand the data so much better that I can then do another form of analysis and feel
yeah,
a lot more grounded in it.
yeah,
So I've moved from coding to narrative construction or
yeah,
poetic
yeah,
inquiry and other stuff.
yeah, absolutely. I've had students who do both. I have students who would do like, I teach them a mixed medium arts based analysis that is critical and contemplative and shadow work oriented and all of those things, you know. So they do this mixed medium thing. It's the first thing I teach them. Then I teach the traditional approach. But they would say, you know, because we did the mixed medium analysis and we had this artwork, now when I read this, I know how much weight I want to give to certain statements because of this work that I did before. You know, so it can be used in so many different ways, beautiful different ways as well. So all right, so I'm going back. We digressed a little bit because we're both qual geeks, you know.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. I love it. I love it. So this might be a little bit longer interview than I anticipated, but that's all right, you know. So I would say like, so within the S2S, what part of the process did you like the most in working together?
Probably the more contemplative meditation exercises. I I think that those are really imperative in my journey in developing my scholar identity through S2S. Um, and I think back, I'm going to tell another story if that's okay. I know
Yeah,
we're already pushing time.
that's all right. Go ahead.
But I think back to the meeting where we were talking about finding our purpose.
Yeah.
And we did this meditation where you had us, you know, sort of clear everything away, connect to the ground, think about us being in a bubble, and then like, is there someone or something else in this bubble? You know, could be a force. I feel like other people in the program had very like spiritual connections. And I was like, Bernie Sanders is in my bubble. Why is Bernie Sanders like grumpy with his mittens sitting here in my bubble? And I'm like, Bernie, go away. I'm trying to like figure out my purpose. You can't be here right now. And Bernie was like, why do you think I'm the one showing up? And so like we're in this meditation space and I'm like having a grumpy
Where do you go?
conversation with Bernie Sanders in my head and being like, okay, I get it. I get it. My purpose is change. I want to be a change agent within academia. Bernie Sanders wants to be a change agent within the government. And so once I made that connection, I realized, oh, okay, this makes sense. This makes sense. I have grumpy Bernie Sanders representing like my patron saint of trying to make a difference in the university and in the field of qual.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those kind of exercises and really just getting down to the bare bones of who we are and why are we doing this work? What is driving us?
Hmm.
I needed that. I needed that
Yeah.
figured out and spelled out for me.
That's really interesting because I was thinking you were going to say something very technical about law or theory or something. And it's really interesting. Like what Leah is describing is like the first 10 to 15 minutes before we get started, we start with a contemplative activity, and that usually, sets the tone for the work that we're going to do during that time together. It's in one of our live meetings. And, a lot of times I think like, so in this meditation, I ask people to think about like somebody who is wiser than you or who you imagine to be wiser than you to come and share with you some kind of wisdom that you need to know right now. And what I find is like people see the thing that they want to do next. Usually the people usually see the thing that they want to do next. People usually awaken to an awareness of something that needs to move differently for them, and if they're stuck, they might find something that brings a sliver of possibility maybe that they couldn't imagine before. Sometimes the gamut is wild, but oftentimes the stuff that is externalized is usually an internal thing that's getting externalized, essentially, that I'm asking you to internalize it again, So your Bernie bro moment may have been that, you have been craving for a space of inclusiveness and belongingness in academia for a while, and it's Bernie bro is just a symbolic thing. It's not really about it could be about politics, but it's not really what's driving that. But it's driving this hunger you have for folks who do research from different theoretical methodological approaches, also feel like there's space making in that work and value in that work. And you've been hungry for it because you haven't experienced it in abundance. And you were hungry for it to say, fine, if I haven't experienced it, I'm creating it. And that's how I read that moment. And then from that point onwards, that's all you're doing. You're confident, you're congruent, you're sending out papers, you're sending out more papers than you have before. And you're like, I need this to happen. I'm not sitting here waiting for somebody to make it happen. I'm just going to make it happen myself, and I'm going to be confident that this is okay. This is okay to do this, so this is amazing. This is really amazing. It's interesting how our wise being shows up for us, all right. So kind of summarizing the experience, what would you say are the 3 biggest benefits to working with me?
I think the first might just be your ability to help people get in touch with that internal self that they may not even be aware of. You have this uncanny ability to do that. Like you are the guide helping us figure out which direction to go in and juggling those things. And I've never met someone else in academia who has that kind of outlook. Similarly, your commitment to like mentoring our whole selves instead of just who we are whenever we're on the clock. I needed that because I don't believe that you can separate professional and personal. Like we are the same person in whatever space, and you are the first person to really even just acknowledge that as a thing and then work with it. And that just invaluable, huge lesson. And then just your wealth of knowledge cannot be ignored. I know that I can ask you any question and 99% of the time you're going to know the answer. There has not been a time when you have not known the answer. I just don't like generalizability, so I didn't want to say all the time. But I don't know, like you are such a wealth of knowledge, and being able to have access to your knowledge through you is just like nobody could put a price on that. That's incredible.
I've said, like, people call me with call 911 questions,
Yeah.
Call 911,
Absolutely.
I might even have a podcast with that title, Call 911.
You really should.
It sounds like Call 911 because it's called
Yes.
911.
Oh my God, you should absolutely do that.
I already have the website bot and domain bot and all that stuff. So anybody listening, do not steal this. I have this. Do not steal, people. Do not steal. Okay. One thing I wanted to bring to our awareness was that we had added a few wellness sessions with our wellness coach, Dr. Paul Maxfield. And I want to ask you, like, how did that work for you? And how did you respond to the wellness sessions? And how did that contribute to your journey and to your growth?
Oh my gosh. I referred to Paul as my academic therapist throughout the whole thing. So my partner would be like, what are you doing today? And I'd be like, I have academic therapy. And not excited about it, but I
Now,
am.
I will tell you, just for clarification for the viewers, Paul was not offering therapy, because I have to be very specific about that. It was not. He was a wellness coach. They met only a few times, like 5 or something, and that was it. It wasn't therapy. Just so we know, because we are not offering therapy. Okay, go on. Carry on.
Sorry about that. The thing that I loved about talking to Paul is that he would help me make connections between things that I wasn't seeing yet as connected, to the point where I know that me and the other S2S people in my cohort would joke around about, like, seriously, Paul, I don't know how I didn't see that. How dare you? How dare you be able to read me so clearly and just make these obvious connections that I have not made? Like, I'm offended by how easy that was for you.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, those wellness sessions with Paul were amazing, because I was really able to take the stuff that I was already grappling with in the S2S space and group and personalize it and apply it directly to my life with someone who understands academia and knows the questions to ask to make me arrive at those what could have otherwise been obvious, but I was just blind to them, things. And that was so helpful, just having him ask me the questions to lead down the path to see these connections between what we were talking about in our larger group setting. That was amazing.
Yeah. Well, your how dare you, because you had expressed that to us in our conversations, that you come out of conversations with Paul and me and then generally land in a place of how dare you, like, how dare you make me see things? How dare you, It
is both of you.
Yes, we obviously teamed together and make you see things and provide insights, So Paul and I now use how dare you as that has become our shortcut. So we have a Leia-ism in our house,
I'm honored.
With Paul's, like, we would go for walks, and let's say we were working through some issue or whatever, and I'm helping Paul see something that Paul didn't see it himself, maybe he would just turn around to me, and the first thing he would say is, how dare you? And we both know exactly what that means, and we would start laughing. So that's your gift to us. I wanted you to know how dare you is a gift, that you have.
Honored.
Yes.
I feel like you should both have that on your business cards.
Yes, this is the business of how dare you. It's a truth and dare exercise that we do with our mentees, So okay, so as we're wrapping this up, I just wanted to ask you, what might you say to people who are considering working with me in academic coaching and kind of maybe on the fence, not sure, like, what would you like to say to them?
Oh man, I would say that this kind of level of in-depth spiritual healing, which again, I am not that kind of person, so to even use that language feels weird to me. This mentoring program is able to help you connect with that, like, scholarly spiritual self And I didn't know that those two things could go together. And I needed that kind of foundation before I could really go into other practice-driven mentoring type situations where they teach you, the time management and stuff like that. What you get from S2S is so much deeper than skills that you can apply, because you also get to know a part of yourself that you may not have gotten to know before, and that there aren't even really other spaces in academia that exist right now to help foster growth in that space.
Mhm.
This is the only thing out there right now that does that. And that is not something I knew that I needed.
Mhm.
And even if someone had told me I needed that, I would not have believed them, because I would have thought it sounded too like hokey. But I did need that. And I will forever be grateful for participating in the S2S program and getting to know you and the other people in my cohort who I still talk to regularly.
Yeah.
And we now have this built-in support system. There's just so much I got from S2S that you're not going to get anywhere else.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate this. I appreciate all the profound things you've shared, including your gift to us on How Dare You. I also find it super interesting that all of this is driven by, your need to discover yourself and feel a sense of belongingness. And that was your biggest takeaway. You did not mention anything about the skills, anything about theoretical framework, anything about any writing feedback that I gave you, any of the other skill-based stuff that we did. You did not mention a thing about it. Not that it wasn't important, I'm sure it was.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's absolutely fine, because I didn't want to prompt you to go there. If this is what you took away, this is what you took away. And that's profound. Like, what is the price of feeling completely whole and bringing all your parts to yourself and say, I don't have to split myself up in 1,000 million pieces just to be able to publish this paper, just to be able to get through this annual review, just to be able to go up for tenure. What is the price of that, to say, I no longer want to operate from a splintered trauma-based place to create belongingness in academia? Like, what would that look like? And you just described that's what it looked like for you, that you were building a foundation of creating an identity from a place of healing, from a place of belonging, from a place of joy. I mean, we laughed, we cried, we did so many things together, and that's what you're really sharing here. So that's profound. I'm not going to censor it or edit it, but I do want to notice it, that people want to go into coaching programs because they want to learn skills. And I do have a whole chunk of the program on skill development as well. But you're walking away with something going, skill development is great, but this is way more important, so I thought that was really nice. Thank you so much.
Yeah, happy to share.